Hello everyone, my name is Daniel. In case you haven't watched my first video, which you should, I am a South African ant keeper who is sharing his love for insects and tips on ant keeping. I decided to do this because I too learnt what I know from YouTube, so I'm simply returning the favor. In today's video, you will see how I move ants that are in dirty, unhealthy test tubes into new, clean test tubes. I will also show you each queen I have and keep you up to date with their progress as colony starters. First, let's look at the queens I have decided to move into cleaner test tubes. Here are all the ant queens I have so far. You can clearly see that the water in some of the test tubes is not the right color. There's also quite a bit of dirt in most of the test tubes. The reason for this, as I said in my first video, is that when feeding my ants, I simply place the food into the test tube for the queen. The result is any leftovers are left to lie in the test tube, which causes it to rot and even attract fungi. While this isn't always ideal when a queen is trying to raise her larvae, they do have ways to deal with it. I personally have seen queens spray fungus, presumably with acid, from their abdomens. Ants also create designated garbage sites to limit the amount of dirt near their colony. So the ants can deal with these dirty conditions, but as an ant keeper, I must try and provide them with optimal conditions to ensure they will thrive. Therefore, moving them to a cleaner home is my responsibility. First, you will need to create their new clean homes. For a guide, watch my first video on how to make a test tube setup. Once your test tubes are ready, simply put the two test tubes, the dirty and the clean one, together, so the queen can travel into the clean one. To encourage the queen to explore her potential new home, expose her to lots of light. Ants, especially queen ants, are generally photophobic, i.e. they do not like the light. This is quite obvious since they tend to live underground. But why is that? Well, based off of what I have read up on ants, they are possibly descendants of prehistoric wasps who would create burrows to raise their young. Eventually, these wasps lost their wings over time as they remained on the ground. It is possible then that they associated the soil, or rather the darkness, with being safe to raise their young. Another possibility is that they discovered it was not possible to maintain optimal conditions like humidity and temperature when in the light. The sun would cause temperatures to rise and fall, also affecting humidity. This then encouraged them to create their own conditions, resulting in them digging tunnels or creating other homes. Whatever the case, the light should encourage the ants to search for better conditions. By covering the new test tubes, when the queen finds it, she will deem it safe to live in and will then transfer her young across. I decided to move across 3 of my queens, one which already has workers, the other 2 with just larvae and eggs. I was going to try and see if I could get another 2 to move across, but when I tried before, they didn't even bother exploring. Since the 2 queens are very small, perhaps the environment isn't affecting them too much, since they only need a small living space. Larvae and eggs are also present, which means the queens are still able to raise their brood and find food despite all the dirt. My other queens are still okay within their little homes and will probably only need to be evacuated much later. As you can see, the queens and or workers will start to move their young to the new clean test tube once they are ready. Therefore, you might have to wait quite a while before they even get started. And sometimes the queen or workers won't move to the new test tube. If that happens, try shining more light onto them. But be careful not to make it too hot or the ants could die. Otherwise, just try moving them out at a later stage. Now that the moving process is complete, let's look at each of my ants. In small test tube 1, we have this large queen with several workers and a large brood. This is my largest ant colony so far. I caught this queen and about 7 workers from the wild about 3.5 months ago. I tried to keep them in my ant farms, but they were not raising eggs in either of them, so I moved them into a test tube setup, which they have been in for just over 2.5 months. These ants are known scientifically as Myrmecoria natalensis. In this test tube, we have a queen and a worker. I'm not sure if there are any eggs or larvae, but it doesn't look like it. She was one of the first to raise a worker, but she hasn't been laying any eggs recently. I have had her for just over 2 months now. Her scientific name I do not know. This large ant queen has 3 workers and a healthy brood of cocoons, larvae and eggs. She raised them all by herself since she is fully claustral, and soon her workers will be more active and explore. I have had her for just over 3 months, and she is scientifically known as Camponotus maculatus, or at least that's what I discovered. Next is this ant queen, also from the genus Camponotus. She has quite a few workers and a large brood. I have had her for about 2.5 months now. I am not sure how she grew a colony so fast, but she is ahead of the previous Camponotus queen, despite me not finding her first. These 2 queens are of the same species, in my opinion, since they look identical. They both have larvae and I am unsure of their scientific name. I have had them both for roughly 3 months now. This duo of ant queens have been the most unsuccessful queens I've ever kept. I'm clueless when it comes to their scientific name, but they are a pest species that is quite common here in South Africa. I'm quite confident the reason they could not raise their young is because their species reproduces by budding. This means the queens don't raise eggs alone, but get help from workers from the colony they were born. I've had them for 3 months now. And now for the terrific trio of ant queens. These 3 are ants that I see very often as elates when nuptial flights occur. They are deadly due to a nasty stinger they are equipped with. I'm not sure which genus they belong to, but they've been with me for about 3.5 months. One challenge I came across when my queen ant started to raise several workers was knowing when the workers would be ready to start exploring. The very first workers that a queen raised from her very first batch of eggs are known as nanitics. Nanitics are smaller than the average workers of the colony, most likely due to the fact that the queen alone cannot afford to raise a large worker, as it would require a lot of energy from her, which could cost her her life. The nanitics are shy at first and tend to stay near the queen. However, later on they will explore and replace the queen as the food gatherers for the colony. When more workers appear, they begin to search more often and become braver and more aggressive depending on the species. Here I will show you the difference between 2 colonies who have a different number of workers, to show you how the behavior of the workers and even the queen change as the colony grows. First, let's look at this well-established colony whose workers explore often and require a lot of food. Some nanitics are several weeks older than others, but you can see all the workers are small. When connected to this test tube with another queen inside, the workers are cautious, but they move in without much fear and survey the new environment, returning to tell other workers. But this colony is not well established and has only 3 nanitics. When they get the chance to explore, they are very quick and anxious. This clearly shows a difference in behavior of the workers. For the queens, both are still clearly anxious and aware. When I connect this very well-established colony, who started off with fully grown workers and steadily increased from there, their behavior is also cautious. However, they do not panic but travel carefully and alert other workers. One worker moves in cautiously but without fear, smelling the new area. What is very different here is that while the workers are still cautious, they don't panic, and after smelling most of the area, only one worker continues to search. This shows how the larger colony is much better at quickly searching areas than the colonies that were starting off. But you also have to factor in that each species is different, therefore the results are not always going to be the same, so you can use these as a guideline. Hope you guys found the information useful for when you are trying to decide how to proceed with your ants. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Leave a comment below on what you would like to see in the future videos. Next week I will show you how I connect plastic containers to my test tubes, and I will perform a little experiment to show you guys how ants behave when it's lunchtime. I hope you enjoyed today's video. See you guys later.